Welcome to the Green Nurse Podcast, where we bring hope and inspiration for growth and healing. We are here to change the dialogue and stigma around what it means to feel good or be high. Hence the H for hope, I for inspiration, G for growth, and H for healing. And before we get started on our very special show with our amazing guest, here's a little video about what we do in the cannabis space as nurses, and then we will get right into it.
Change the paradigm of healthcare.
The Green Nurse is a holistic cannabis nurse that teaches on the endocannabinoid system and the safe utilization of cannabis and other progressive tools to help people reach a better quality of life.
I'm the founder of Holistic Caring. We're based here in California, and we do educational programs and case management for patients on how to use cannabis therapeutically as a medicine.
We're also here to decrease stigma around what it means to feel good and be high, hence the H for hope, I for inspiration, G for growth, and H for healing.
As the founder of Holistic Caring, I basically oversee the whole ship, and what we're doing is progressive education.
Cannabis actually supports all 11 organ systems, our immune system, and all the neurotransmitter signaling systems that give messages to tell our body to either do something or not do something. Because the plant was prohibited, it prevented health professionals, doctors and nurses from learning about cannabis as medicine.
I want to change the paradigm of healthcare and us paving the way into a new vanguard of medicine.
It's about education, it's about empowerment, it's about teaching people how to feel good, bridging the gap from what they're not getting from traditional medicine, utilizing different plant medicines, adaptogens, tips, tricks, hugs, and nugs of information to support and nourish the most important system in our body.
And it's a lot of soul work, a lot of love, a lot of discipline, and meditation. I'm using my life work as a testimony to others to learn how they can be their own hero and then go help heal the world.
And we are, as nurses, the game changers. Oh, there you go. Did you like that? Wasn't that?
I loved that.
I know. It was so fun. A little video.
Amazing background. Where did you shoot that?
Actually shot that at a farm, and there was lots of cannabis in the background. So it was a farm down in Massachusetts.
Very cool.
On her side, and I was in my backyard in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
that's true. Yeah, we made the video. Yeah. So welcome, everyone. My name is Sherry Mack, and I'm the Vice President of Nursing and co-founder of Holistic Caring and the Green Nurse. I'm a cannabis nurse, cannabis patient, advocate, activist, and a very passionate podcaster here to change the paradigm of healthcare with my partner. And I'm really excited to announce that this is my 7th year podcasting The Green Nurse Living Your Best Life. I started podcasting in 2018 when the National Council of State Boards of Nursing came out with their guidelines that all nurses must have 6 essential areas of knowledge when it comes to cannabis as medicine. I started podcasting to share compelling stories of healing and to decrease stigma, since I too use cannabis as medicine. But before we get started, we have a very special message from our sponsors at Bloom Hemp. Elizabeth, tell us about Bloom Hemp.
Okay, so Bloom Hemp is a woman and nurse-owned hemp CBD supplier with USDA organic hemp CBD grown in the mountains of Colorado, leading with quality, safety, patient-centered care, and value. Bloom Hemp is triple testing for potency, purity, and cannabinoid profiles, and offers a free nurse line. So call 970-404-HOPE or 4673. And you can talk to a nurse or a pharmacist and ask your questions on how CBD might work for you. And always a Green Nurse for 10% off.
There you go. Thank you, Bloom Hemp, for sponsoring our show. You are their #1 sponsor. So cannabis nursing has been recognized as a specialty, and nurses are truly making an impact on advocating for the safe therapeutic use of cannabis. And today, we have a remarkable nurse leader on to share her cannabis nursing and psychedelic nursing journey with us and what brought her to become involved in the plant medicine arena. So I have Meagan Lynn Pilawski, who is a scientist who spent years working as a nurse in palliative and end-of-life care. Her close experience with healing her own aggressive autoimmune disease and with the dying process led to an ultimate interest in entheogens and accessing higher states of consciousness. She facilitates a variety of different ceremonies in the greater Tampa Bay area. She received her master's in Medical Cannabis Science from the University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Pharmacy, and is attuned Shamanic Reiki Master and a Yoga Alliance certified yoga teacher. She has completed a certification in brain longevity and is passionate about helping those afflicted with neurodegenerative disorders. In her yoga classes, Meagan places a strong emphasis on body scans and subtle body awareness and curating a ceremony within each moment. She hopes to use her experience in research to continue to identify compounds and modalities that facilitate the healing of deep cellular traumas so that people may refine their spiritual toolboxes and facilitate deep, miraculous healings for themselves. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I am so honored to be here with you both.
Wow. We have a lot to talk about, and just to start off, we all don't wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to become a cannabis nurse. I'm going to become a psychedelic nurse. I'm going to become a psychedelic nurse facilitator. I'm going to go into this all in. And here you are, you did that. And so our viewers want to know your story. What led you to cannabis first? And then we'll get into psychedelics.
What led me to cannabis first? Well, I definitely wasn't like graduating from nursing school, like, yes, that's where I'm going to go. I don't know if anybody was. You sort of like end up there by happenstance. But what initially led me to cannabis, obviously I experimented a bunch when I was in high school, like many of us probably did. But as a nurse, I was working, as you read in my bio, in end-of-life care and also inpatient oncology as well. So I started to get familiar with just some of the lack of knowledge that surrounding cannabis that physicians had, that, patients, I would get put in an uncomfortable situation where it's like, I have to eat this gummy. It is literally the only way that I can keep this saltine cracker down, and I'm like, well, who am I? Who am I to say no? And started learning a lot about the red tape there. And at the same time, I was dealing with my autoimmune disease, which was diagnosed secondary progressive multiple sclerosis. And it was down spiraling very, very quickly. So I started to do a little bit of research, particularly for some of my comfort measure only patients about, like cannabis suppository seems like that would be a good option in these patients. We could bypass the liver. We don't have to stick them 100 times in their last few days here. And I remember bringing it up to my nurse manager and it was like, no. And I'm like, and I was just like naive and like, I didn't know really anything around the legalities with it. And so I decided, fast forward, the disease got very bad and I decided to kind of step down from floor nursing to heal a little bit. And I ended up scrolling Facebook one day. I wish it was a cooler story, but I was scrolling Facebook and I saw an announcement from the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy that they had finally got the curriculum approved for the first master's candidate program for Medical Cannabis Science. And I just knew right then and there, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I need to encompass. Like there's been this piece that's missing. It's not jiving with me just to treat these people like their financial identification number. They're a soul. They're bigger than that. Like we have multiple planes of existence. And I was also really curious because as far as research go, MS is one of the more heavily studied disorders with cannabis. So I decided to drop out of my nurse practitioner program that I was halfway through and applied to this medical cannabis program, got in, and it was a big relief. As soon as I made that decision, I also at the same time applied for my patient card. We're a medical state here in Florida still. So I was able to kind of be my own guinea pig in a ways as I was going through this graduate program, like which certain synergistic combinations of cannabinoids and at what dose and at what route would work the best for me and where I was at with my MS. And of course, as you can imagine, there was a bunch of trial and error, and there was a little bit of over medicating and that I had to correct as well. But I just continued to get better and better and better. And I mean, ultimately, we'll get into the psychedelics later on, but it was a really beautiful bridge for me to learn to commune with those more subtle layers of myself that I've been so far removed from, just being in that hospital setting, and just so heavily medicated on everything. It's always externally sort of reaching. Cannabis was sort of the first tool that gave that power back to me. It wasn't just, oh, here's your gabapentin for your spasms. It's like, no, there's a little bit of work on your part too, Meagan, and you have to figure out what works. And I like to think that that was the first thing that started to fan my flame that had been dim for so long. So I'm very, very grateful for this plant. And as you already know, I've dedicated a lot of my life to just spreading the good word about it and educating people just like you guys.
Yeah.
Cool.
So for people that are new out there, that someone that might be have MS, what type of products do you use? Just so they can, so there's a lot of new listeners that are out there that may have MS. What types of products have you found to be beneficial for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't make like huge umbrella statements because everyone has like a different disease course.
Yep.
I'm going to just say what worked for me. Definitely 1-to-1 ratios are something that you should be working with. Those are very heavily studied and found to be more efficacious if you are treating a chronic pain. And for me, it was spasticity. So I know that it's not for everyone to combust or use flower. I just personally found that that's what works best for me. So I would do a 1-to-1 ratio of I look for very dominant strains in beta caryophyllene. You guys already know this, but for the viewers, beta caryophyllene has some of its own therapeutic properties, even in isolation when the cannabinoid is removed. So there's lots of really cool studies about that. I've seen some cool ones about limonene out of Johns Hopkins as well. So I look for a strain that has beta caryophyllene as one of its dominant top 3 terpenes. And then I would half my joint or my bowl with CBD flower or CBG flower. And that is what worked the best for me. And I would smoke usually just small tokes consistently throughout the day to kind of keep that level in my system. I'd say maybe every 4 hours I would take a hit. I didn't personally find that more long-acting things like gummies worked for me, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't work for MS. It should always, the whole point of this is listen to your body. But yes, that's been extremely helpful. And I was at one point on 17 medications and about 10 of them were for spasms alone. And I'm on nothing now.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Do you have anything you wanted to ask?
Not just yet.
Yeah.
Not just yet.
Yeah.
That's
So
fascinating.
that is very fascinating. I mean, coming off of 18 pharmaceuticals is, 17, 18. Before,
it was a lot.
And how freeing is it? How much freedom do you feel not having to be reliant on a pill, a clock, a watch, right? The pharmacy, the prescriptions, standing in line, getting it, the renew, like it's like a job.
Yeah, it really is. And it feels amazing to have my power back in my hands. I mean, it may seem like, oh yes, that's great, you got off the meds, but it was so much more than that. It was reprogramming an entire neural groove from since childhood that like help can only come externally, and that nothing is inside of me. And the light was here all along. The tools were here all along. It was, having that veil lifted, that veil of medications for me to access what was already there.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I definitely want to dig deeper into that. And because so many people need to lift that veil and to figure out how to do it. So, we need to go into, what's in the spiritual toolbox.
Yeah. But with the spiritual toolbox, did you develop your spiritual toolbox with cannabis or with psychedelics or with both?
With both. There's a lot of things in my spiritual toolbox. And a spiritual toolbox is just your modalities, your tools for your personal practice. In yoga, we might call that a sadhana, but basically it's your ritual. It's what brings you home to yourself, what gives you equanimity and peace and brings you home to the center of the universe, the center of you. And it changes in the tides of my life. Cannabis is usually pretty up there as a tool for me, but I do oscillate in waves the way that I change it. Sometimes my body feels really good. And in that point, I take a step back and I'll only use it for prayer or more spiritual use. And when I am maybe having a little bit of a rougher time, sometimes the summer months can be a little still on my body, then I clearly delineate with intention, like, thank you so much. And I pray with it. And this is to heal my DNA. And this is to help with this symptom. And I delineate a prayer versus just blessing it for medical use. And then in my spiritual toolbox, yes, there's been lots of psychedelics. I definitely believe in integrating them. I have tried quite a few and sat with quite a few of them, but integration is very important to me. So the most important parts of your toolbox are what you do on your day to day. How do you make it a ceremony? Is it lighting a candle in the bathtub? Is it journaling for 10 minutes in the morning? Is it putting your feet in the grass for 10 minutes consistently on your lunch break, no matter how busy you are, and giving yourself that gift of grounding? So it can look like so many things: acupuncture, martial arts, like it can go on and on. So you can see how it's so individualized and different for everyone. And cannabis was a beautiful bridge to individualizing what works for me. It led to me to cultivate that spiritual toolbox for myself. It was the beginning.
And all of those things that are in your spiritual toolbox actually support and nourish the endocannabinoid system and the endocannabinoid dome.
They do. Yes, they do, because we have endogenous cannabinoids. So breath is a huge one for me. So, and my partner does a lot of breath work practices, and I do too. I teach yoga as well. And I always try and insert it in my cues, like expressing those bliss molecules and upregulate, and because you can, yes. All of these molecules are inside of us. Ananda was named for bliss in Sanskrit, for those that don't know.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And if you could speak a little bit to most of us who have suppressed that inner voice, that knowing, that self, that sense of self, because we're human beings, but we're human doings, right? And we're taught how to be in the groove, how to be serving, how to be, attentive to everybody else's needs, and forgetting. I'm maybe speaking for myself, but and really not tuning into my own self. And with cannabis, I remember, the first couple of times I used it as an adult, right? We all had high school and college, but
yes,
it's like being able to turn off that monkey mind and go outside and see the beauty in a different way was just breathtaking. It's something I'll never forget when I first had another puff, when I was an adult.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And, and what you said reminds me of sort of what I talk about in the Ganja yoga ceremonies that I do. I always draw a parallel to yogic philosophy. We think of Shiva in yoga as like that big blue guy, right? And he's always looks like he's smoking on something. So why did he use it? It was to invoke a sense of bodily presence. And that right there is where the innate wisdom lies. Our wisdom is our experiences, all this information, it all lies in our cells and in our DNA. So to use that herb to invoke a sense of bodily presence, to get out of the monkey mind, which I love that term. I love that you use that. I use that all the time as well, is where your true insights, those true uploads come. It seems counterproductive, like you'd want to just sit there and ruminate on it more, but it's actually just lowering that center of gravity from the head, where it is 99.9% of the time, down into the heart, which that dialect is only understood dialect is just felt sensation. So it's that code of the body. And that is where your most profound and deepest insights come. And, hence why we see so many people using it to invoke creativity. It's like all of that that's operating under the horizon of our awareness, the cannabis gives us the gift of amplifying it up to that level of awareness.
Nice. Beautifully said. Absolutely. Okay. Well, we all know that psychedelics, we're in a psychedelic renaissance. I am a psychedelic patient or consumer as well, microdosing. I've done deep dives and journeys, as has Elizabeth, and we've written programs. And there's a story that goes along with that as well. And what propelled you to try psychedelics and to get involved in the space and to become a facilitator?
Yeah, absolutely. So to answer that, I'll back up just a little bit to sort of my aha moment. Everyone has that sort of like rock bottom before their alchemy. And for me, it was actually, it wasn't right away that I figured it out with the cannabis, right? And I think I mentioned there was a time where I was going through pharmacy school, like trying to like apply what I learned like real time, and like was on RSO, and I don't even remember like half of the class that I took when I was trying to do that and stuff. So there was a point where I sensitized myself much more to pain, and it was deeply frustrating. It was just after years of frustrating disappointments with treatment, and I kind of just started messing with the cannabis, but wasn't quite off all those medications yet. And I developed a very kind of a rare presentation of what we call an MS hug, which an MS hug is basically like a Charlie horse or a spasm of the thoracic muscles. And it's called that because it feels like someone hugged you really tight and then they didn't let go. So it's common, maybe in about half, I'm not sure if I'm right on that stat, but somewhere around half of MS patients experience that. But it's usually quick, like a spasm that releases. Mine locked up, and it stayed for 92 days. Wow. And for 92 days, I was deprived of the ability to take a deep breath. I was in the hospital for most of it. I started to, just lose function just because they'd been contracted for so long. They found a doctor to do something very off the books and experimental, where he ended up doing a diluted ablation of my T8 through T11 to release the spasm. And basically, one of my most profound psychedelic experiences didn't involve putting anything in my body other than what he was using to ablate. It was getting my first deep breath. And as you can imagine, the endogenous release of DMT and anandamide was just through the charts. It'd been 3 months, and I had this, and I truly met Source. I met God, and it was like, you've been walking around in the dark, searching for light for however many years. And there you've had matches in your pocket, like the whole time. And that was how the message came through. And I came out of that and I said, I see my role in this now. I see the pain body cycle, and I will never let that happen again. This was my bottom, and now I go up from here, and I'm just going to start calling my power back in. So I decided my first experience with ketamine with a psychedelic was actually with clinician assisted ketamine. Because I was on such a high amount of medications, I did want to safely get off of them. I did have ayahuasca and combo later down the road, like in sight. But I went through a clinic down here in Tampa. I had a wonderful experience. I received it intravenously. I proceeded to have very spiritual experiences and ended up like what I now know is astral projecting during one of my infusions. And so that was a bridge to open things up for me, as that really helped me to kind of go a little bit cold turkey off of some of the antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs that I was on related to the MS. And so those really helped me to get off of everything. And then I ventured into combo. I knew that I wanted to work with ayahuasca and other psychedelics, but I wanted to work on the physical level first. It was important to me not to bypass myself. So I started with combo. And then I did my first ayahuasca ceremony years ago. I got really profound healing. I had experienced, I guess, what you could call a shamanic surgery within that. And I started working before that on making these mind movies and envisioning in my mind every day what like lengthening my own telomeres would look like, and what, neurogenesis, what does that look like? Just to me, it doesn't matter what it really looks like, but to me, what does it look like? And I would bring that in my process in my ayahuasca, when I was able to like venture into my conscious awareness and have that sort of control. And I just continued from there. After ayahuasca, after a good amount of integration, I sat with my first bufo, and that one really stuck for me. I knew that one was going to be a very valuable tool in my life.
For the people that are new that may not know what bufo is.
Yes. So bufo, I'm referring, when I say bufo, I work with the secretion from the toad. It does contain 5-MeO-DMT. So you can take a pure molecule form. You can also, it can be extracted from other plant sources as well. But when I refer to bufo, I'm referring to the secretion of the Sonoran desert toad. It contains bufotenin, 5-MeO-DMT, and a whole bunch of other things. So yeah, I started to develop a really beautiful relationship with that medicine. And that's been probably one of my main tools over the past few years, and for my healing as well. I would say that was most useful in sort of restructuring my relationship with death. I had sort of an interesting block there from the type of nursing that I was in. So it was really interesting to just sort of witness where it is that we come from and where it is that we go. And that feeling of oneness kind of led to inner child work that I don't know that I've achieved with any other tool. And for me, I think that was really important. Well, I'll back up and say, I think for anyone with an autoimmune disease, I know that it's a correlation and not an exact causation, but I think it's a fair enough generalization to say that a lot of people with autoimmune disease have dealt with some sort of chronic PTSD or some sort of childhood trauma, suffice it to say. So it really allowed me to go in and allow myself to be held, which I realized that I don't know when I had ever held space for myself. My whole life, and every program, nursing didn't help, was, your power lies in giving your power away, which is like very contradictory, but it helped me a lot with that. I've also found, I actually just started a Wachuma dieta for microdosing. I'm on day 3 right now. That's actually a newer one for me. I didn't sit with San Pedro until this year, actually. I've been working with other ones for years, and that's been very beautiful. I'm happy to report. I feel really great. I think it's been a nice bounce when I work with cannabis so much to bring in sort of a healed and divine masculine energy in as well. I think that's really healing, pertaining to some things that we'll get into the podcast later as well. So yeah, I mean, it just one thing bled into another. And I'm so grateful. As I said, they take forefront and they take the back burner sometimes. But I think the most important thing for me is that these entheogens and these psychedelics they're tools. They're not replacements. And it was important for me to work on that program before just jumping in and looking at psychedelics as, oh, this will fix me. Don't do that. Don't do that. Refine the rest of your toolbox first and what you'll come back to. And then I like to look at it as like reading a map. I don't sit with bufo that often anymore, because how often do I need to read a map before I kind of have it memorized? I know the work that I need to do, and I know what tools I have around me that can bring me back to that space, even without taking it. And that's important.
That's beautiful. And it is true. In sitting with these medicines, and then being in the retrospect of that, months later, years later, and being able to visualize that same process without taking any substances, that is truly a gift to be able to carry that for the rest of the life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the gift they give you. I mean, I know that some people, they have one, amazing journey, and that's enough for them, because it's lifted the veil. Because really what it's doing is lifting the veil of what's already happening. right? So we see what's already happening and we can take it from there.
Mhm. Fascinating.
Yeah.
So, what considerations should people have when choosing a plant medicine facilitator and why? And let's talk about what is a plant medicine facilitator to start with. So, there's a lot of new people that are out there that are exploring psychedelics. You know, you know, I've gotten a couple of drops of spammers in here that are dropping all of the, you know, find me on Instagram, Mr. Myco on you know, IG, you know. So we have a lot of psychedelics that are flying around social media being sold that you know, people are just starting to really, you know, let's talk about that, like the safety of it and choosing the medicine as well as choosing a facilitator if you're new.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually have a couple good sources that maybe I can put in a chat or I can give to you and you can share later. I'm in a couple support groups on Facebook that have thousands and thousands of people in them. One of them is a Toad and 5-MeO support group. And I really like to go there. They have pinned an article by the Conclave, which is very, very detailed. I find it to be a very extensive and well-written document about questions that you, as someone who's interested in sitting with an entheogen or a psychedelic or with a facilitator, these are the questions that you should be asking. You should not just blindly pick something like that based off of a cool Instagram ad. So there's several things that go into number one, I would say do a search online to look for any accusations of malpractice. That would be big. Just as we would for a surgeon, if we were going to go have a surgery, we would want to know if they were all over the news or paying out someone, you know, for a terrible mistake. There's millions of considerations. Gosh, I could go on about this, but I would say they should always be willing to conform to a container that you feel safe for. And they should never be offended by that, whatever that looks like. If, hey, this is how I ground myself and I'm not comfortable with sacred touch or anything like that, that would be a big red flag to me if they had a problem with that, because you are ultimately holding space. And what it means to hold space, I'll get into a little bit. But as a facilitator, we have I'll go as far as to say a moral responsibility to show up in a coherent state. And when we talk about coherence, I mean, we have these electromagnetic fields that extend feet out of our body. And coherence can lead into incoherence, but thankfully incoherence cannot go the other way. So we have a duty to show up. And when we are serving some sort of entheogen or some very heart-opening compound, those people are very impressionable and very malleable as well. So there's really so much responsibility on the facilitator's part to, one, keep your ego in check, and two, which is a huge one, we'll go more into that in just a minute, and two, to practice safely and to also take the time with the medicine yourself. Something that I do see a lot is, you know, people have these life-changing journeys and experiences, but then they come out of like their first ayahuasca process or their first bufa, and they're like, I am going to be a shaman. I'm going to train tomorrow. That's my calling. You know, and I'm not making fun of anyone who feels called to do that by any means. But what I do emphasize is that would be the importance of delineating between your spiritual ego and what you actually need to take time and integrate and assimilate. Because just as same with nursing, we need to teach from experience and we need to lead from experience. How on earth would I be well equipped to help someone who is having a very tough integration if I've never tried it? I just looked like a cool online course that I could take.
Right.
We're talking about ineffable concepts here. So, I mean, you know, other huge things are no touching. I don't think that hape or any sort of, no touching unless it's warranted and it's discussed first. I'll back up there. I think sometimes somatic processes as long as there is consent, can actually be very helpful.
Yep.
But, you know, like you pouring water down people's throats or putting Hop-A up their nose or touching in an inappropriate way, or, you know, just serving and then you never hear from someone again. There's so many things to look for with that and lots of questions to be asked. Those two resources, one, as I mentioned, there's a TOAD and 5-MeO support forum. They have guidelines that are very well written from back in like 2017. Those have been pinned up and they're still very, very relevant and are very applicable to much more than just Bufo. And also the Conclave was another really good guide that I like to look at that goes into what it means to hold space, the moral and ethical responsibilities of a facilitator, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I kind of look at it, you know, it's a little bit different because, you know, but, you know, working as a nurse, you know, you think of when someone's coming out of anesthesia, you know, you're tending to their needs.
Yes.
Where you're like a recovery room nurse,
Yeah.
right? You're tending to their needs. They're the ones that are doing the healing, but you're just making sure you're just checking in, you know, temperature checks. How are you feeling? Thirsty, bathroom, you know, you're just there to hold space for them and to make sure that they're okay because they're in their own process. So the facilitator is just there to guide and to direct and to hold space and to provide tools if things get uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. And to delegate as needed too. You know, I think that's another important thing. If something's coming up either A, emergently in the process, or B, afterwards in the integration, and you know that deep down you're not equipped to handle it, you need to be able to take a slice of humble pie and refer. Yeah. Because that's the mark of a facilitator who really takes it seriously. It's not about stroking your ego.
Yeah, and it should be taken seriously. You know, we talk about the moral obligation, the academic preparation, the taking the medicines yourself preparation, right? Yeah. Like this is something that is novel. Not a lot of people have this experience, but those that are leading others, they have a duty to all three of those, to study, to experimentation, so that you know, and you can come from that frame of reference. We've all had a surgery. We all know what that's like. But this is something very different. And then the moral duty to uphold that space in the highest integrity. All three of those have to be met.
Absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
So let's talk about what happened and why it's really important to have a very healthy, sound facilitator. You have a story.
I do have a story, and that was one of the main reasons I came on here to share it. After some time healing, I felt it was really important. As I was mentioning to you before we came on, you know, one thing that the quarantine sort of gave us is this like psychedelic, like reemergence. You know, we couldn't leave to go do these shamanic journeys anymore. We had to like figure out how to do them in the US. We're all like locked down, right? And with that came this just boom on social media about just terms that are overused, that are thrown out, you know, integration. Sometimes I question, do people really even know what integration is? Because it's more than just texting, hey, how you feeling? So anyway, with that is why I'm leaning into this story. There's, as I was mentioning to you, it's like nurses have, you know, this sort of board of ethics. So do doctors, you know, we see that in a lot of areas, but where do facilitators go? You know, who kind of holds them accountable? And at this point in time, it's ourselves. And, you know, there's always going to be, unfortunately, someone who doesn't live up to that and does not operate in integrity, which leads me to my story. I was in an intimate relationship with someone who was serving Bufo as well. And we ran into a lot of friction in our relationship as I was very focused on the safety with my nursing background, and he felt that those parts weren't relevant, that, you know, the medicine will just fix everything and do all the work, and integration is stupid. So as you can imagine, there was a lot behind the scenes. anyway, so fast forward more towards the end of our relationship, it was becoming very unhealthy and verbally abusive. And we still had a ceremony planned to serve together that had been planned for. So, I spent the morning just trying to become as coherent as I could and hold space for these people that we were serving. And as it was time for them to leave, I did something that I wouldn't normally do. I felt very called to take a small dose myself because I was deeply struggling. There was a big internal dichotomy with, how we were serving medicine together, but what was actually going on behind closed doors and what I was actually experiencing was narcissistic abuse, really is what it was. So the participants decided, after they spent their time integrating and grounding and they were okay, to walk to their car. And I said, I think I'm going to stay back with my partner. And I told him, I said, I'm deeply struggling with our relationship, with how to move forward with it. I feel very abused. I feel put in a cage, and I would like to pray with medicine to ask for strength. And looking back at that now, like I was asking medicine for strength to deal with abuse. So I get the bird's eye view of how that looks now. But the point of me sharing that is that I vocalized that, and it was understood that this was a ceremony. We had a fire going, everything that we would for any other participant. The prayer had been opened, the portals had been opened. I was already really upset, and thank you for holding space for my prayer. I proceeded to take the dose. I trusted him, so I didn't ask what dose he was serving me because we are so experienced for years doing it. I didn't think that that was even an option, that to overserve me or to double the dose. But I had a complete and total whiteout experience. And I later learned that it was over 150 milligrams of the bufo secretion, which is a massive dose. When I came to, I was disrobed and he was inside of me. So I felt this complete disassociation, and I felt it the second it happened. I mean, it was just, I went numb because I had to survive. It was quick. I didn't have time. I finally came out of the medicine enough to say no and sort of push off a little bit. And, he proceeded, while I was still in that state, on my knees to insist that he needed to finish, and I couldn't do anything about it. So that, as you can imagine, excuse my language, was one of the biggest mind fucks. And just to be spiritually penetrated in that space, psychically, it's hard to really put into words what happened. A lot of it came through later, once I was actually in a safe space. It was a total disassociation in the moment. And I had to walk back to the car with him. And in my head, I'm like, did this just happen? You need to get out. You need to pack the things when you get home and get your son out and stuff. And he just looks at me and he's like, why are you so quiet? He had no concept. So it did take me a couple of weeks to get him out of the house. He was actually on felony probation for something else. So there was some complexities with that. And I knew that he was going to have to leave the state 2 weeks later. And I used that as an opportunity to pack all his things and change the locks and do it in the way that made me feel the safest. So I spent the next 3 months really, at first I was riding this high of I got out of a situation that was terrible, that I can't really believe just happened. And I used it at first to really catapult me into just a deeper state of integrity than I've always operated in integrity, but now it's really at the forefront for me always. So later that month, I decided to get a plane ticket. I had no plan really, and that I was going to go collect my own medicine, because in the back of my mind, I had this concern that this tool that gave me so much healing, that has played such a big role in my life. This person has already stolen a lot of power from me, a lot. And I'm not going to let them ruin my relationship with this sacred tool. And I'm not going to let them ruin me educating from a place of integrity and helping people who do want the help. So I decided that to deepen my relationship, I was going to get a plane ticket and I was going to go collect my own medicine. I had no plan. I didn't even have a place to stay. Like, funny enough, as I was getting there, I wasn't quite off his phone plan yet. And he heard what I was doing. And he said, "Ha ha, I just went to AT&T and turned your phone off. Good luck." Ha ha ha. And so I was in the middle of the desert. There are these toting apps that you can use to kind of track rainstorms and stuff that are kind of necessary. And I was just completely on my own. And I said, "You know what? Keep throwing stuff at me, because I'm not letting you ruin this." And I had such a deep and beautiful and meaningful experience. It was probably the most adventurous thing that I've ever done. But to say now that I've done that myself, and I can say with complete veracity that it was done with integrity, that I sang and I prayed over those toads and I thanked them and I didn't rush it. And I did it the proper way. I didn't milk them dry, meant a lot to me. I proceeded to finally, a couple months later, come forward with my story on, it was on a public forum, which I believe might have been how we connected. And I started dealing with very, very immense backlash. This person decided to share intimate photos of me with other facilitators and, with even my own father over the internet. It was it was deeply violating on yet another level, as you can imagine. So I did what felt right to me, which is to take that time to heal. And I think that any facilitator, like I said before, has that responsibility to show up with coherence. And I knew that I wouldn't have been able to at that point, because I was deeply enveloped in this psychic attack, trying to make sense of what happened in Bufo space when I was missing parts of time, but I could kind of feel these energetic attacks in my body. Is very scary. And there was a lot of times that I wasn't even sure that I was going to make it out. And it was very hard to differentiate between a physical threat versus an ethereal threat. And I started to develop panic attacks, which I've never dealt with really in my life. I've dealt with depression when I had the MS, but not so much panic. It got to the point where I couldn't go to the grocery store, and I moved cities, and I finally started to take back a little bit of my power one by one. I did get an injunction for stalking to stop some of the cyberbullying and that. And thankfully, a judge saw immediately what was happening and granted that right away. And that gave me a little bit of peace. And, I've slowly just taken time and given myself grace. And as I said before, it was always deeply important to me, the safety, but I bring this story up because it's just so important to screen your facilitators and to take your time. Just because something's available to you, when you might be able to click on an ad, oh, cool, this person looks awesome. They just gallivant around with mushrooms all day. Cool. Really take your time and screen them. Why do we screen other people and other professions so seriously, but you wouldn't do it for someone who's really responsible for holding space while you're exploring your own consciousness? You better be sure that that person takes their morality very seriously and consistently checks in with themselves and their spiritual ego and is able to discern. And I also think that the other important point that this raises is, although I was very clear, and I think that there's no gray area, I made it very clear that this was a sacred ceremony. It does beg, the question of having conversations. If you are a facilitator and you are in an intimate partnership, having conversations about boundaries and such is another very, very important topic. So I'm really happy I got through that. But that's,
Yeah.
Wow.
It was, yeah.
and it's, it's not easy. The law hasn't quite caught up, I think, with it. It's hard. This is hard to bring in a court of law because, for me to go in and say, yes, I chose to go do psychedelics in the woods with someone alone. We could probably all make an inference about like what law enforcement would say, and also just like the half-life of a lot of these compounds we're talking about. Like they're gone quick,
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's just important points to think about.
It's a whole new, like I said, novel, right? Like nothing like this has ever existed other than in research, right? So if we go back to the 50s and 60s when, LSD was being used in psychiatry and mental health, etc. There was controlled settings and, set and setting and, the psychedelic experience with Leary and all of those guys, right?
Yeah.
It was set up in the parameters of ethical practice and wisdom and really integrating. And Kay Parley, one of the first nurses to work in psychedelics and in the sitting realm, and what it's like to be that shepherd of someone, body, mind, spirit, emotions, social connection.
Yes.
And normally, we think of us as a body when we're interacting with the healthcare system. But the consciousness is a whole new realm, and thank goodness for MAPS, and I'm so glad for their success and paving the way forward. It needs to happen in a much greater conversation, and we need to destigmatize these plant medicines so that we can have that research and the conversations that need to accompany it, so that people can do this safely, because they are finding something and oh wow, I can get 5-MeO DMT online. Let's just do it, and they rush or psilocybin or LSD or any of them, and they think this is a limited time experience and I just need to go take it, and they trust because they're excited, but that needs to be curtailed a little bit, and to really have your sense before you go and make sure that you're doing it right. And I'm so sorry that happened to you, as far as that deep experience, but thank goodness we survive and we're malleable, and neurogenesis and neuroplasticity to learn new ways of paving that forward for others.
And for you to also not be afraid of that medicine still, for you to take your power back and to seek the medicine on your own and to still explore with it and not be afraid, because you were assaulted under the influence, right? And so a lot of times people would automatically associate and tag, I'm never doing that again, right? Like, in other words, they make the drug bad. And it wasn't the drug that's bad, it was the person that was bad doing bad things.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And, there was still a long period up until actually just a couple weeks ago, I have not allowed myself to take a full dose of anything in front of anybody. I've taken full doses, but I'll do it by myself, or in my home. And it was finally, actually just a couple of weeks ago that I thought, it's not that I'm more than qualified to serve myself, but that's another important thing that I'll get to, like letting someone hold space for the facilitators is also another thing that facilitators should be aware of. But something was telling me, you need to learn to trust again. And it doesn't mean you need to have someone serve you all the time or something, but it felt to me energetically like it would be the lid on a healing era. And that last final step was to allow myself to be vulnerable, because I gained control and some of my power back, but it's because I was always the one in control, or if I was at a ceremony, I'm taking a microdose, because there's people around me. And again, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I really do not wish to give any more of my power to anyone else other than myself these days. So I trusted a woman that I've known for many years, who I have collected medicine with. I allowed her to serve me, and I received really deep healing from that a couple weeks ago. And as you were talking, it begged me to say that I think that that's another important reason to cultivate those other areas of your toolbox first. Because say you develop a relationship, whatever it is, meditation, yoga, acupuncture, any of those things, what it will give you is at least a small amount of insight into the energy body. And if you have even an inkling understanding of energetics, that can start to direct you to make a little bit more of a conscious choice when it comes to choosing a facilitator or knowing when is the appropriate time to say yes to something. Do I say yes just because, I got a targeted ad, for microdoses and just because it was right in front of my face? No. Now I've spent time integrating and using those other tools in my life, and I understand the difference between a gut feeling and something that I'm just yearning, that just looks cool, basically. And so I think that that's a huge part of it. It all kind of ties back to like the integration in the spiritual toolbox and helping us form these conscious decisions.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit, this is really important too. When there was an article that was written a little while ago, shortly, about, people doing psychedelics and having their egos become really more inflated and more grandiose. And
yes,
about that. Have you seen that? I've seen that. I don't know. Have you seen that?
Yes, I have seen that. The person in question, I think, would be a great example of that. But
like, what do you think is happening? So, it's either, we see people, that the whole, we have egos for a reason. They keep us safe and protected. And my goal is my spirit lead my ego, right? Yeah. So ego mastery, the spiritual principles leading my ego. It's not going to go away. I can't have an egoectomy. But why do some people, when they start to delve into these psychedelics, all of a sudden it becomes hyperinflated? What do you think is going on?
I think it's just a lack of information. I think it's the same way that we see the word like Kundalini thrown all over the internet, or Tantra just used like wholly inappropriately and just completely overused at all. Yeah, the ego dissolution one, I'm really happy that you brought that up, because that actually always really gets in my nerve. I like your term of mastery. My term has always been, it's about learning to dance with it, which I guess is another way of saying what you said. But yes, our egos have a reason, they're there for a reason. That's the reason that we don't put the hand on the hot stove again for the second time when we're a baby. We figure it out, and it's there to protect us. We don't want to kill the ego. I think it's just it's social media doing a disservice. It's people sitting with something one time, or maybe having an ego dissolutive experience, once, or a journey, and sharing that. And I don't think that the intention is always bad on their part. I think it's a projection of, oh my gosh, I found something that gave me such immense healing, and I just want that for everyone. But like the next level is having the discernment to actually educate yourself on what happened with your journey, and also recognizing that you have to meet people where they're at. And, I can sit here and talk all day about what worked for me and what dose of bufo and what dose of cannabis and stuff. But that's, again, where the facilitating part comes in. I'm not here to project what worked for me onto you. Something that might work for you might be something that I don't really even care for that much. But that's where you have to delineate. And all I can say is about the ego dissolution, I do as much as I can to start conversations around that whenever I see that pop up, especially in my friend circle. And that's really the best we can do, is putting content like that out. Science-backed content, why we need the ego, why this could be a dangerous term for someone who is just going to take that at face value and say, well, that's what I need to do. I just need to kill my ego, and then all my problems will be solved. And we need to expect that there are people who will take that at face value, because it's social media. That's what people do, So I think there's a little bit of responsibility that needs to come back on the people who are putting out that content.
Yeah. I want to, go a little bit more into what is the role of nursing?
Yeah.
In this, to close this out, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but to really say, in your dreams, as far as, how things need to play out in the future, what is the nurse's role in helping steer this whole new industry?
Well, per usual, the nurses will be the bridge to steering it for the entire medical industry, like we are for everything. Because we're the ones that are getting like the bedside, that intimacy with the patient. We're the ones there, 23 and a half hours a day, right? Yeah, and I think it's starting conversations about that. I actually did a really interesting, for my thesis in my master's program, we looked at the percentage of US medical schools that even like cover the endocannabinoid system, and it was crazy low. It was less than, I think at the time, a couple of years ago, it was still under 10, but yes, it was very low. So one, I think it should start there. I think that this should be integrated. Like, this obviously is a renaissance. There's things getting descheduled, rescheduled. There's lots of research going on. And to get ahead of that, I think that we should really implement and mandate continuing education courses. It should be part of your curriculum. If you graduated a long time ago, then, you should have to go back. You should have to take X amount of hours, at least on that. You don't have to be familiar with it. I understand that's not for everyone. I'm not advocating that like neurosurgeons just take a little break and go do some mushrooms really quick and then come back to their case. I'm not saying that, but you should be able to have a conversation with your patient about it. And most importantly, which I think this is not something where nurses have an issue, is more something, unfortunately, I've seen doctors have an issue just because of lack of education, is to be non-judgmental.
Yes.
Because it's this terrible negative feedback loop. It's exactly what made me uncomfortable when I was in oncology nursing, is that oncologist made this patient feel so unbelievably judged and referring to them as a drug addict for something that's helping them eat, helping them survive. It's just completely backwards and stuff. You need to have and maintain your cultural competency and to present yourself in a non-judgmental era and read up on these things. We have a responsibility to do that as well. I read all the time. I reopen my books. I learn stuff about Bufo that I didn't know before. I'm constantly taking notes. No one's making me do that, but I'm holding myself to a standard, and I hope to be a beacon for others who are in this field who should be doing the same. I hope that one day that there is some sort of board of ethics or something. I don't believe in anything being too like capitalized on, especially like in a ceremonial sense. But I definitely believe that there should be a code of ethics and standards that is internationally known. Like, everybody knows about it.
100%.
Yeah.
There's a reason why I discovered plant medicine and then became an academic and had to write programs, because it started with cannabis and cannabinoids, and then it was psychedelics, and Sherry's about to show the psychedelic programs and services, and everything in here is explained, and in a very educational and informational and entertaining way to learn. This program took a lot out of us. I remember, just dedicating so much time to studying this because it's all brand new, and people need to lead. And talking about licensing, as nurses, we have the responsibility to get continuing education year after year after year. And this should be in there. Cannabinoids, psychedelics, the basics. I'm licensed in all lines of insurance as well as in nursing. And, for insurance, I have to take ethics every 2 years when I renew my license. And nursing doesn't have that. In California, we need 30 units, but you can slice and dice as much as you want. But because so many people are using plant medicines now, we have 50 million Americans that are cannabis users, according to studies and new research. And, psychedelics is about 1/10 of that, but it's coming. We all know it's coming. And the impetus is on us to learn it. But regulatory agencies need to start saying, people are using this. You need to come from that stance of non-judgment and understanding of why somebody would do this. We talk about bridging the gaps all the time. Conventional medicine leaves us wanting so much. And we have to overcome the shortcomings and limitations of conventional care for these patients and ourselves every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I firmly believe that like this should be integrated into like all of your anesthesia checklists.
Yeah, totally.
It should just be standard, and you know, you should
cannabis
cannabis is, yes. Thankfully, yes.
Because it interplays. You know, there's interactions. There's conversations that we need to all be adults and not call somebody a drug addict just because they're using cannabis and psychedelics.
There is. And, you know, when you feel pushed away by your care provider, you know, say I'm not a nurse. I'm just someone, CBD sounds cool, you know, but I'm on like Lipitor and Xanax and all those things that move through that same like biosynthetic pathway and stuff. Who do I go to? And, you know, unless I know to search for you guys, it's like, I would like to see a little more responsibility in the provider, even if it was just, hey, you know what? It's something I'm still catching up on, but the Holistic Caring and Green Nurse has this amazing resource that you can read about that, you know what? I'm going to do my due diligence and read about. And I just want you to know that you're not being judged and this is a safe space, period. End of story. That's how it should be.
Amen.
Amen.
So, Meagan, do you have any events coming up?
Any closing thoughts?
Any closing thoughts? Any events?
Okay, well, I always do something conscious for 420, as you could probably imagine. This year, I've teamed up with a very cool arts collective in St. Pete called the Divine Freak Collective. They do conscious sort of raves, very cool with like functional mushroom drinks. And there's always a theme. This one's like an enchanted forest theme. So I might be dressed as a fairy when I'm doing my ganja yoga, but I'll be leading some 420 yoga and going a little bit into the ritualistic entheogenic use and conscious consumption, setting up ceremony around your use and just using it and exploring it in a different way, stepping out of that medical versus recreational box and expanding that a little bit further and really tapping into the body. So this will be a fun little segue into a nice little ecstatic dance, very conscious event. This is very close to downtown St. Pete. So if anyone's local, would love to have you.
All right.
Tell our friends about that.
We are
Tampa.
Tell our friends.
You guys should come. Yes.
We're not doing anything quite so exciting, but we're having sales at Bloom Hemp, and Holistic Caring has 50% off all month with the code NURSE50.
Yep.
So you want the psychedelic program or the Cannabis Nurse Health Coach program, there's 50% off with NURSE50 all month to celebrate April 420.
NURSE50. Meagan,
You're
a rock star. You're a rock star. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for sharing your tender heart with us. Yeah. Literally, you're very well spoken and you did an amazing job and you're doing amazing work and very, very great.
Guys, thank you so much for the work that you're doing and just all the education you're sharing. You guys are making a very big ripple.
Oh, thanks. And remember, everyone, what it's all about. It is truly all about living your best life and helping others do the same. I'm going to end with one of my other last favorite videos. It's my high video.
God bless.
God bless.
We're here to educate and empower patients to make choices that are best for them. We're also here to decrease stigma around what it means to feel good and be high. Hence the H for hope, I for inspiration, G for growth, and H for healing. The Green Nurse is a holistic cannabis nurse that teaches on the endocannabinoid system and the safe utilization of cannabis and other progressive tools to help people reach a better quality of life.
I was cannabis agnostic for many, many years. And you know, the more research I did, the more I discovered the cannabis is this amazing medicine.
I was told that I had a 4-stage pancreatic cancer. The doctor really told me he couldn't do anything else. He gave me her name and she called me and she came to my house. She started to give me cannabis. My oncologist was puzzled because he couldn't find the cancer anymore.
All of the learning that we get comes from the Green Nurses Group, comes from their support, comes from their guidance. I trust everything that she says.
Simply meet people where they're at. The plant doesn't, stress to grow, so we don't stress to share it. We're healing people.
Cannabis has been used as a medicine for tens upon thousands of years. Here's the big message. Cannabis needs to be federally legal. We need to have laws that are the same across all 50 states that allow access to anyone and everyone who wants to utilize this powerful medicine.